How's everybody doing today? Good. Thanks for coming here. We've got a great panel. First off, I want to apologize to everybody. We unfortunately have one Marine on stage and 3 folks that served in the Army. 2 of them went to a safety school, West Point, which we'll talk about how they feel about that. So I'm Zach Giskell. I'm the CEO of Task and Purpose. We're a new site for military veterans and service members. I'm joined today by 3 really remarkable Army veterans. Joe Quinn served 2 tours in Iraq, graduated from West Point in 2002, and is now at a great veterans organization called Team RWB. Also, Jenny Pacanowski is here. Jenny joined the Army in 2003, did a tour of duty in Iraq, and now works with veterans as a facilitator, helping them with writing, and providing them a lot of the tools that they need for coming back home. And then finally, Patrick Dowdell. Patrick now works as a sales guy for a financial tech company, but also graduated from West Point 4 years after Joe. And Patrick did a tour in Iraq and also did a tour in Afghanistan. And so thank you guys all for being here today. So just getting started, you know, Joe and Patrick, 9/11 means something to you guys in a way that it doesn't to a lot of other Americans. You know, all of us sort of remember that day. It impacted the trajectory of our service. Patrick, you lost your father, Kevin, who was a firefighter, who ran into one of the towers, is a remarkable hero. But just what are things that you wish people or want people to know about your dad?
Well, I mean, he was a family man. You know, me and my brother raised the right way. You know, but at the end of the day, I'm really proud of the service that he was doing for the city. And as a kid, you kind of look up. You look up to your heroes. My dad was always my hero, and it definitely inspired the man I am today. And like the route that I took going into the military, it was all kind of a trajectory that was built in me when I was a kid. And it stemmed from him being a fireman, and then obviously when he was killed on 9/11, it just kind of furthered that resolve. So I would just want everyone, like it's anything. Like when you lose someone that's really important to you, you want them to be remembered in the way that you remember them. So as a patriot, as a hero, and as a father, and someone who cared about us.
Were there moments or were there memories of your father that you sort of held closely to when you were deployed overseas, or things that come to mind that you could share with us?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's funny because you look back, I think, in those moments when you need help or you need to ask somebody something, you always think, I wish I could have asked him this question now. It's something that, in retrospect, like if you had the ability to ask those questions, it's always, sometimes it's too late. But I just remember anytime he was put into a situation where he needed to kind of, charge into what was going to be a dangerous situation, he never faltered and never had a second guess. I mean, when I was a kid, we'd be on the road and a car would, get in an accident, and he was the first one to pull over and just help. So it's something that I just saw my whole life. And, then when it was my turn to do it, I just kept thinking, I wouldn't want to let him down. So it kind of, inspired like my decisions at the time as well.
Well, you must have been awfully proud of your service and the decisions that you made to do. And Joe, can you tell us a little bit about your brother, Jimmy?
Yeah, I have a different perspective. My brother was a huge pain in the ass. He was in the middle of 3 brothers, and we were bunkmates growing up. And just sort of the kind of guy that just didn't, talked a lot, and he used to talk me to sleep, every night, and the one thing though, he just loved life. So my brother, Jimmy, was just 23 years old. He graduated Manhattan College. It was his first job out of college. He was working at Cantor Fitzgerald on the 102nd floor of the North Tower, and Cantor Fitzgerald lost all 658 of their employees that day because they were kind of stuck above the impact zone. But we always tried to keep the spirit of my brother alive, and talk about him in a true sense of the kind of funny, wacky guy that he was.
And you were at West Point at the time. How did that inform your service? I mean, what were the conversations you had with your parents like after that? You know, you just lost, they lost a son, you lost a brother, but now the nation's going to war, and you're at West Point.
Sure. Yeah. When my mother saw the towers on television, you know, early on, her first thought was, you know, oh my goodness, my son's at West Point. He's going to go to war. Not even thinking that anything was going to happen to Jimmy, because if you look back early on, the holes in the towers just look small in comparison to the size of the buildings. And everything just sort of unfolded as they kind of imploded. But for me, my choice to go to West Point, I started in 1998. President Clinton was president. I don't come from a military background. I got recruited to West Point to play basketball, obviously, if you're looking at my LeBron, Zeke, one of my teammates, Sean O'Keefe's in the back, who looks more like a basketball player. But it was to play basketball and get a good free education. And I was a terrible cadet. I was just a terrible soldier. Just none of the things that you would think. It was always the third thing that was part of the West Point experience. And that just changed in a blink of an eye, the way life happens to all of us. So my service completely took a turn that, you know, maybe now I wasn't helpless. I can maybe do something and serve something in relation to that day.
And Jenny, can you tell us a little bit about where you were? You joined in 2003, so 2 years after 9/11. But where were you on 9/11, and how did that then impact your trajectory and your career and your decision to join the military?
So when the towers fell, I was in my apartment in Pennsylvania. I was going to school full-time for criminal justice because my father refused to let me join the military. I actually wanted to be a Marine. He was a Marine. And he said, I don't want you to be like me. Be smart, go to college. But that was never how I felt at my core. It was always something I wanted to do. So I was in college. And the funny thing about my story, or interesting, is I didn't have a TV at the time because I was such a poor college student, working full-time school. And I heard all the information over the radio, first in my apartment and then in my car. So the imagery in my head is so wild, because hearing it is so different from seeing it, and then finally seeing it and being like, oh, okay, that's what's happening. And then it just, you know, continually got worse and worse, and as the towers fell. And then I proceeded to, fail out of college. So I joined to get my student loans repaid. But also, I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to, I was a medic in the Army. I did medical support for convoys. So it definitely sent me in that direction. And finally, my father was able to give in to what I wanted to do. So that's how it ended up for me.
And Patrick, when your first deployment was to Iraq, and then your second deployment was to Afghanistan. You know, with the impact of 9/11 having on you and on your family, and sort of setting you on a trajectory to join the service, did it feel different when you then ended up deploying to Afghanistan almost 9 years later, 10 years later?
You know, it didn't really feel different. The deployments to me were, at the time, that's why I joined, you know. Like I said, like after 9/11, the resolve was to go serve the country, not in terms of like revenge or that I needed to prove anything, just that I felt like it was the right thing to do. But the deployments between Iraq and Afghanistan, very, very different deployments. I was in Baghdad in Iraq, so more urban. I was in, the desert in Farah in Afghanistan. Just totally different deployments in terms of everything from the threat and the type of fighting that was going on and all that. But the deployment to me was more like, I just wanted to do a good job. Like you're coming in as a second lieutenant, don't know really anything, no experience except for what you study at West Point or whatever. So you don't want to let your guys down. You don't want to let your troops down. So the focus was just to make sure everyone was safe and to do our job, and that was it. So it didn't extend beyond that in terms of like what I was thinking and how it related back to who we were fighting or why. It was just, here's my job. I want to make sure that I do a good one.
And can you talk a little bit about the type of support you had from your community joining the military, and then also while you were deployed overseas?
Yeah, I had an unreal, just everybody was so behind me. My brother's now a fireman in the FDNY in Brooklyn, so his firehouse was very active. My father's firehouse, they would send me packages. On the inside of the box, they would write, "We're freezing from the air conditioning, so full from all the steak and beer." A little bit of encouragement for me. But yeah, everyone, and then my family, obviously, everyone was just very proud of the decision, and they understood it and they supported me. So, family and friends and my community. I live in Breezy Point in Queens. Just a super tight-knit community. Lost a lot of people on 9/11 as well. Have a lot of people that have served as well. So everyone was just behind me. So I really, really did feel very lucky that I had so many people supporting me.
And your father's firehouse lost everybody
Right.
on 9/11. And your family, does your family still have a relationship with that specific firehouse?
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to go there on Monday. Every year since 9/11, we go to the firehouse in the morning. They have a ceremony or memorial in the morning. I'm lucky enough to actually play the bagpipes with the FDNY Pipes and Drums. So we played at all the funerals after 9/11. So we do that day. We end up playing the pipes at different memorial services. So I play at the firehouse, my dad's firehouse. We play at my brother's firehouse, and we make a day of it.
Terrific. And Joe, what are you going to be doing on Monday?
Yeah, I kind of think of it, it's weird, 16 years later, it's almost like this somber family atmosphere that happens every year. It's sort of like the family you don't want to be a part of, but they're your family anyway, and we just sort of have our own kind of routine. We go down to what used to be called Ground Zero, but the World Trade Center and the memorial every year. We still wait for his name. I've been petitioning to have the names in reverse order so we could get Quinn in early so we could get to do breakfast. But no, typically then we go to PJ Clark's, and then we go over to McSorley's, and sometimes we'll meet up with Pat. And, it's just sort of a thing to try to remember and tell funny stories and celebrate his life.
Jenny, what do you think of that? I mean, as somebody who works with veterans, somebody who works with survivors, what's sort of the best way for people to mark an occasion like 9/11?
Well, Pat's story specifically moved me as I'm sitting here.
Oh, thanks a lot, Jenny.
Throw you under the bus. Because it's all about community in my work. And the biggest thing that's happening to veterans as they transition home is they don't have a community that understands them or understands what they went through. So having that community to come home to is essential. And essentially what I try to lead to in my work, on Monday I'll be meeting with Bedlam Outreach, which is a veterans acting class. But really it's so much more than that. It's community, it's camaraderie, it's people that understand the experience and that we can sit with and we can be with them and we can talk about it. And then we invite civilians in every once in a while to do a showcase, to show them what's going on with us. Because I was talking to Zach earlier, and we've lost the rituals of coming home. Theater presents this a lot. Greeks, Romans, Native Americans. There's the warriors come home and they tell their story and experience to the community. And then we can all share in it together. And we can all be each other's strength, be a witness to what happened. And when you have something like that in your community, like Pat does, I'm sure your family has that too, Joe. And then we create it in the different writing workshops, the theater workshops that we do. And people sometimes, especially veterans, can think that theater is more feminine or foofy or whatever kind of label you want to give it to. But it's a warrior tradition to come home and speak about your experience in the past. So I would like to bring that back for our veterans. And I think that will lower the suicide rates, the homelessness rates, the addiction, because we can come home and know that our community will hold us.
That's great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Just a few more questions before we turn it over to the audience. But, Joe and Patrick, you guys just, well, not so recently, but in the last, 1 year, 2 and 4 years, you guys became fathers. Has being a father changed and also the time and the distance. Now it's coming up on 16 years from 9/11. Has that sort of changed the way you view this date, or also just how you think about as, maybe your 4-year-old is at a point where you can start to talk about the meaning of 9/11. Your 10-month-old, maybe not so much yet. But are these things that you've thought about as a father, and what type of conversations you'll have with your kids about your brother and your father?
Yeah, we've, with my daughter in particular, she's 4 now, and she sees the picture that we have on the wall of my dad, and she's like, who is that? And we tell her it's Grandpa, Grandpa Kevin. She's like, well, where is he? And you try to explain, like, he's here, he's watching you, like he's in heaven. She's like, so he's in the clouds? And, like, it's very, it's cute but at the same time, it breaks my heart because we want to, she's obviously, he's going to be a part of her life. But at the same time, he didn't get to experience that part of his life, which is, I'm sure would have made him so happy. So, but yeah, I think it's going to be an important thing. And, I almost feel lucky that if, even though we lost him, he was part of, this event that brought so much good into my life as well, into our lives. Like, as a family member, I never really thought about it in terms of a positive, but then as the years go on, you start to meet people, and, like me and Joe, we share something that's terrible, but at the same time, we understand it, and it kind of brings us together at the same time. So, out of good, there is positive, and I think that's what my kids will experience, is that it's a time for us to come together. She'll hear the stories, we'll keep the memory alive, and it'll become a part of who they, grow up being.
Yeah, Joe, you and Patrick were not at West Point together. You graduated just as you were starting. Mm-hmm. Then you guys met after. How did that happen? How did you guys first meet each other?
Yeah, I don't even remember. He just kind of showed up at my door at Fort Sill, Oklahoma one day, and I said, yeah, come on in. I don't remember this specifically, but I think we knew of each other, and it was just one of those things that I was graduating, and a guy from neighborhood's going to West Point, but then I was immediately sent to Iraq, so it was kind of, before all this technology and social media, it was kind of phone tag until he graduated and came out to Fort Sill, where I was stationed at the time. And as Pat mentioned, the bond was immediate, as far as, connecting the way I view it. My brother was 23 years old, and he was stuck at the top of the tower, and his father went in trying to save him. And then afterwards, millions of soldiers deployed in response to that. And to me, that's what I hold powerful. And, the other thing about 9/11, I feel it's one of, the worst days in a lot of our lives, one of the worst days in my life. One of the things I miss afterwards was the unity that we all felt afterwards. We just felt so close. I think, George Bush was even cheered in the Village during, after 9/11, And I think we still have that. I don't think we're as disconnected as we are. And the community building that Jenny does, I bet she sees that as well. So I think it's a lesson that we're more alike than we're different.
So you work for Team Red, White, and Blue, which is a phenomenal veterans organization, national in scope. Are there things that you wish you saw more Americans doing on 9/11, or that they did to mark that occasion?
Yeah, no, definitely. My psychology and my thought process is pretty simple. I lost a brother, and I'm always looking for brothers and sisters to kind of connect with, and I think it's very similar with those that transition out of the military. They were on this great team of this close-knit unit, and then they come home, they don't have that. So through Team Red, White, and Blue, we try to replicate that team, that sense of brotherhood and sisterhood and camaraderie, and different chapters of communities in 216 communities across the country. And this year, every year, we run a flag called the All Glory Relay across the country, and it kind of signifies that unity that we want people to experience, to kind of, swipe right or left on your phone, power down, turn the television off, and just go out and introduce yourself to someone, and really connect in a real physical way with your community. And that's what we try to bridge between the community and veterans.
And Patrick, what would you want people to do on 9/11?
I think everyone deals with days like 9/11 differently. We use, when we talk about it internally amongst ourselves, we always reference people that lost somebody on Pearl Harbor, or people that lost somebody on these other, major, almost historical events. That day is different for everybody. That if you're not as connected to it, you're not always, gonna, remember or spend that day the same way as somebody like my family who lost somebody, immediate family. So, I mean, I just think it's a day of reflection, and like Joe said, if nothing else, it should kind of bring us together in our resolve as Americans. I think I just want it to be a positive day. I think at the end, when we look at it as a negative and as a time to be sad or down, it doesn't do anybody any good. It doesn't do the memory good of those that we lost. So we try to make it a positive day. We tell the stories and we laugh and we smile, and we try to remember it in a positive light. And I think that's what I would want for everybody. To spend the day reflecting and thinking of things in a positive way.
Well, I mean, certainly your father, your brother, not only were they role models, but they certainly gave us you two. And that's quite a gift, and the people that you both have turned into, and the way that you have chosen to honor their memory is pretty substantial. And Jenny, I'll give you sort of the closing remarks on how you would like to sort of see what Americans can do on 9/11, what your advice would be to us.
I believe it's a day to just come together and accept each other and show tolerance and kindness and compassion for each other, because that's what my work is with the veterans. And then if the civilians are practicing that, and then we come together, there is no bridging the gap. There is no divide. We can have open dialogue, conversation, and just really be a community, a true community, and a support to each other.
Thank you. So I think we have a couple audience questions.
Hi there. If you could convey a message to families of veterans and those who we lost, what would you want to say?
A message to families of those that we lost in service to the country. Yeah, it's an unfortunate part of war, and it's. I don't know. I've had to experience that when we lost guys, and you have to, go back to the family and say, I'm sorry. We did everything we could, and these things happen, and that's why I think nobody hates war as much as a soldier. But to those families, it's a similar thing, and they were in service to others, and they were willing to sacrifice themselves for what they felt was a greater cause. So you just want that family to know that it means something to us. It may not mean something to everybody, and I say the same thing even about 9/11. It doesn't always mean something to everybody, but it means something to the people that that served and the people that support those that served. So you just want them to know that they're not alone, and that we remember that and we appreciate the sacrifice that their loved one made for the country.
Hey everyone, I was just wondering, what does the 9/11 memorial mean to each of you?
Yeah, so I'll take that one. They took a hole in the ground and really made something special, and it was an impossible task. You had family members that had a say in it. You had real estate. You had government officials, federal, state, local. It took a while to get off the ground. But it really is a special place, and it really is well done. And I would say all Americans, definitely all New Yorkers, kind of owe it to yourself and your community to visit. And it's not a place of sadness; it's a place of resilience. And you might even go to the museum and hear a funny story I tell about my brother if you choose to go. But they've done a terrific job. It means my brother's remains were never found. So for us, it's a place we go to honor and respect and pay tribute to him. But it's also a place, I think, for all New Yorkers and all Americans to go to be together and reflect.
We have one more question.
Hello. I wanted to know, what do you think people in the country can do to have 9/11 not be a forgotten date for future generations?
I think it starts at the home, right? It starts with the way that you personally feel about it, and if you keep it alive in your life and the people that you are in touch with, then it'll stay alive even in a small way. But as a country, I mean, there's discussion around making it some sort of memorial type day. They call it maybe Patriots Day or something along those lines. I don't know that I mean, it's going to be something that stands out as a day in history, especially, certainly for the near term. So I think it has to be the people that were around for that time, that they tell about what happened that day, and it stays alive through conversation. And like Joe said, like talking to other people and getting involved. And especially as the veteran community, we always, a lot of people say, like, I started my military career because of 9/11. It's kind of touched people in a way that inspired people to serve. So I think it'll stay alive in that sense. But long term, I mean, history, I think will tell, how well people remember as it. I mean, God forbid, and hopefully it doesn't, but something else takes its place. None of us want to see that happen, but the way things are today in today's world, it's a possibility. So, I think at the end of the day, everyone's going to stand ready. Like the guys that we served with and the girls that we served with are ready for that task, and they'll be out there standing guard, ready to take the flag forward.
Terrific. Well, thank you all so much. Really appreciate you guys coming here today, and to the folks that have tuned in, thank you. And to our wonderful panel, thank you.
Thanks.
This is really remarkable, and appreciate you guys being here.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.